And frankly, to be said, it's not justified to compare the Muslim Brotherhood with ISIS. The big majority of claims of the Egypt military against the Muslim Brotherhood, even if it's also had its terrorist self-defense and also attack time, so there have been terrorist attacks from the Muslim Brotherhood, but the majority of the Muslim Brotherhood Muslims in Egypt are not terroristic motivated. They demonstrate peacefully, and they try to do so over month and even now. And so to have them framed as terrorists from other Arabic countries together with Egypt is a very, very bad development for Egypt itself, because it gives additional reason and argument to General Sisi, and he is cruel in his down-battling and using his military, because he knows that big parts, other big parts, and maybe even the majority right now of Egypt, with the side effect of a divided nationalized country, nationalized in the Egypt identity, combined with the support of the military, that they support him in crashing down on the Muslim Brotherhood. And so the Christians even have been very guilty in this, because they didn't speak out against this divide and conquer thing which has happened to Egypt. And so they supported Sisi, because they have been, in a way, soft persecuted by the Muslim Brotherhood before. And I guess, well, what is soft persecution? And there has been real persecution. And also there have been battles between Muslim Brotherhood believers, if you like, and the Mursi people and Christian entities, and so on. And so still they should have loved at that point of time, seen as an enemy population group of Egypt. And so the Coptic Christians now still have the responsibility, and that's what I discussed some month ago then, and years ago, or 1.5 years ago, when the Muslim Brotherhood has been killed down from the Sisi military, and so the revolution has been ended in Egypt. And now we see the pre-running thing to maybe even unite Islamic State and Muslim Brotherhood Islamic believers. And so this is very dangerous and maybe that's even the goal of the Islamic State, to get supporters from the Muslim Brotherhood, to unify them with themselves. And this would be a very, very big problem for Egypt, and a very, very big burning point in Egypt itself. So the Muslims in Egypt would unite under the flag and banner of ISIS against, and I guess they would not, but they will be marginalized. And so I guess they will gain support under Islamic people from the Muslim Brotherhood. ISIS will gain support there. And so it's, well, and I guess Sisi is playing with it, because he knows then that he can even crack down more on the Muslim Brotherhood if they buy on this. And I guess people from the Muslim Brotherhood will distance themselves. And so the Muslim Brotherhood will be split, and by that Sisi hopes to win. And so it's even in the interest of Sisi to have ISIS gaining influence in Sinai and on the Muslim Brotherhood, because it's making it easier for him to justify military action and the rule in his country. And so he and his power is, for a short period of time, not challenged. But if you look to prophecies in the Bible, you will see if Sisi will be the cruel king then, and this will be very, very, very damaging and brutal for Egypt later on.
Terrorism law. Its updated list also includes al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Houthi rebels in Yemen, and the UAE-based branch of the Muslim Brotherhood.
And Al Jazeera, that's to be explained, is connected with the Muslim Brotherhood and is supporting the Muslim Brotherhood and defending the Muslim Brotherhood. And that's one of the few things where I sympathize with Al Jazeera, and where I think they stand their ground in their position based on truth and standing on truth. And so I also support them when they command the release of the 3 journalists, even if they do the reporting on that in a very similar, always daily repeating way. So they always have the repeat mode then. So at the end of the news, they remind their viewers of the imprisoned 3 journalists, Peter Greste and these other guys. And so we had these Amnesty International approach to remind the Egypt government of releasing these guys, and so on. And so to defend when people are framed as terrorists, the Muslim Brotherhood against truth, I will be with Al Jazeera, and where it's not good what they do, I am against what they do. And so
Foundation in London is another organisation that is on this list. And we can now talk to its founder and chief executive, Anas Al-Takriti. Thank you for talking to us here at Al Jazeera. You're on a list with ISIL and Boko Haram. Is there any explanation for that?
Well, the first explanation is that there is influence and cross back and forward talking between General al-Sisi, today's president, maybe even somehow brutally putting himself dictatorially into the power himself, president of Egypt, and the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates influence sphere, because Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates invest in Egypt and they support the military government, and so that's not a big surprise. And so Qatar is sidelined according to this issue, and they can try to release these guys from prison as long as they want. And they can try to help to unframe the Muslim Brotherhood as not terroristic as long as they want. If General al-Sisi has started this whole debate to frame them in the United Nations Speaking Forum Council, at the last meeting of the United Nations where Barack Obama named and framed Russia as comparable to ISIS too, well, maybe next terrorist list item will be, I don't know, the Buddhist from China, or maybe even, I don't know, maybe the grand family of the Saudi king is also then on the terror list, and maybe even with right, because they are responsible for many, many terroristic things. And so the Saudis need to be self-critical, they need to reform themselves, and this smells as part of the blowback thing, because they really discredit themselves. And so I cannot imagine that the Islamic world is not seeing through all of this, what United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia do in cooperation with Israel, Egypt, and the Americans. So the Islamic heart will at one point of time, not only in Egypt, not only in Iraq, not only in Syria, possibly turn against the Saudi king's family and the emirs of the United Arabic Peninsula parts, and also maybe even of Qatar. And maybe even Qatar is doing the cleverest then, because they are not turning their back against the Muslim brothers in the Muslim Brotherhood then.
No.
Well, they're Muslim brothers, because I'm a Christian, and so they're not my brothers, but I still have to defend them if, not them, but I have to defend them if media is, and countries act in a bad way, if I do media criticism and system criticism and the content I do.
To ask the people who authored this particular report and who compiled the list. It's, in a sense, it's beyond ludicrous, to be honest. I mean, not only the Qudwa Foundation, but organizations such as Islamic Relief.
Well, and what I wanted to say is that, well, Sisi has started it. He has framed the Muslim Brotherhood on the terror list, naming them together with ISIS. And Obama has framed the Russians, and which is totally ridiculous. And maybe even some would consider the Muslim Brotherhood of more brutal and more terroristic, even if they're not really terroristic, than the Russians. But the Russians, they don't have to be on a terror list. They fight terrorism, Islamic origin, from many sides, and they even fight the terrorism from Kiev on the East Ukrainian Russian separatist front in a way, even if they don't intervene there as they may have done if they would have listened to the Russians in Russia and the Russians worldwide, who command Russia to protect the Russians who decided to be independent and so on. And so that's a huge, huge mess which is happening to the terror framing thing and with the terror framing thing. And why am I still convinced that this will cause a blowback? And why is Sisi failing in the assumption that his state will be divided and conquered unto a degree? And well, the American military loves to see Egypt in blood and the streets of Egypt full of fear, crying, slaughtered babies, slaughtered Christians, slaughtered Muslims, slaughtered soldiers, burned, bombed cars, and so on. Why is the American military loving something like this, and even the German military industry? And why is Saudi Arabia interested, or could Saudi Arabia tolerate this, or the United Arab Emirates? Don't you, if you're a Saudi prince, a Saudi influenced person, a Saudi Islamic believer, don't you see your responsibility if you're an Islamic brother of the Muslim brothers in the Muslim Brotherhood? Why do you see these as a sect, and why do you sacrifice Islam and use it for business purpose, use it for Masonic power structure friendship relationships with Americans and Israelis? And is that the reality, or is it a wrong assumption out of many conspiracy analyzing content and videos in the internet from my side, and I doubt it is. And I would hope it would be a conspiracy, mystical, wrong concluding theory in the end, but it is not. And this is the problem. This is a problem for Egypt. This is a big, big problem for Saudi Arabia and for Sisi and the Saudi king family itself. Even if Sisi might, in a short run, find an inner enemy and terrorism as a scapegoat if he is not able to bring the economy in a good way. And so you have chaos, and by that you can justify on the surface military rule. And so Sisi gives a damn shit on what I say and about the arguments of including the Muslim Brotherhood, which has been for many, many hours issue of my content and my channel in the time where the Muslim Brotherhood has been crushed down when they demonstrated, and when it has been very obvious that these guys have been slaughtered, and so the Muslim Brotherhood has been sacrificed from the military to bring in back General Sisi and the military into the power and to end the Arabic Revolution. And so does anyone doubt that all of this will not enter the mosques and not enter the Islamic conspiracy analysis? And if you know anything about Northern African and Middle East conspiracy interpretation and conclusion, you know that these people, the more they suffer, the more they're cornered, the more they see the American hegemony, the more they see the wrongdoing of the Saudis and the Egypt military and the Israelis, the more it's boiling down there, the more likely it will flame and burn and explode also in Riyadh's streets. And so even as a friend of the Saudi king's family, if I would be mentioned or named or seen as a friend there, as a Christian, as a convinced Christian, and I have been to Saudi Arabia, and I have no reason to declare them my enemies, even if what they do is brutal and un-Islamic from my viewpoint, and also inhuman and very, very evil and bad. So I have to criticize that as a friend of Saudi Arabia, as a friend of the United Arab Emirates. And does anyone doubt that this will give a blowback? A blowback, not a blowback, but a blowback? Well, and in Germany we say the colors of this, we would say the color of this video is a little bit blaustichig. It's blue colored, so excuse the bad video quality. But that's not the thing I wanted to say. I just mixed the word, and this guy really looks a little bit scared and angry about now being also a terrorist. But maybe everyone in the end is a terrorist, and this is an escalation, and it's real, as he said, it's ludicrous. It's ludicrousy.
Major British organisations on the disaster emergency committee.
Well, and I mean Saudi Arabia, and well, they hope to have the power, and they hope, then the strategy I've already discussed and debated sometimes. The hope is simply, well, you control and by that you kill the idea of a revolution by force, and so you kill it down early, so you preemptively kill it down, and so that's an evil strategy. Some countries do in the overuse and misuse of control and power and military force, and that's why Saudi Arabia doesn't fear it. And they, from my viewpoint, they overestimate their invulnerability, and so they misget the power of an Islamic blowback and revolution and turning against them, from my viewpoint. And maybe they control the Islamic State, and so this will be an indirect proof of the control scale over the Islamic State. They control the Islamic State until a degree that they and Israel and others will possibly never attack from the Islamic State. And so the content I've made before is then, in its meaning, enduring. And so Saudi Arabia will gain its influence, and it will not be somehow turning against them. And if they have created, they may still control ISIS and the Islamic State, and so they don't have to fear a blowback. And that's for parts, at least for main parts at the moment, I guess, this is the case. Because you see it, according to the indicator of ISIS attacking in Turkey, they don't do so. Maybe out of wage process, maybe out of they don't want to hurt their clients, and